exposed thing. You run the risk,
Okay.
depending on the fabric, of the fabric fraying, and after it's washed once or twice, you always want to maintain that seam allowance.
Have you ever known anyone to sew another line to enforce it from using thread?
Yeah, I've seen people do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you recommend that, or is that a waste of time?
No, not that it's a waste of time, but it can, again, depending on the fabric, it can add a little bulk
Okay.
that you maybe not want. So, all right. So now that we've clipped everything, again, we take that center of the back neckline and we're going to tuck up all that seam allowance under that flap, and just loosely pin it. We'll get back to doing a proper pinning later, but just loosely pin it so that the folded edge is meeting your seam line. All right, look at that beautiful clean finish, right? Who knew? Who knew? Definitely starting to look like something. Now this, I'm going to take this loose edge, I'm going to wrap it onto itself, wrap it around the seam allowance. And that gets lined up, folded at the 1/2 inch mark, and that gets lined up with the edge of the shoulder seam of the yoke.
With the what of the yoke?
Shoulder seam of the yoke. Now you're going to have to go in and kind of finesse this a little bit in terms of your pinning. Alright, so essentially we're creating a clean edge. Same thing over here. I'm taking that loose shoulder seam allowance of the facing, and I'm wrapping it around the seam allowance of the neckline. Folding it down. You know what? We can actually reduce some of this bulk. When you're wrapping this over, it creates additional bulk in there. So to minimize that, what you can do is, again, flipping the seam allowance of the facing away from you so you don't run the risk of cutting that. You can trim the seam allowance of the neckline down a little bit. Again, take that shoulder seam allowance, fold it over, and then position it down, meeting up with the shoulder line of the yoke. You can all see that? That's the shoulder line of the yoke, right? So you're folding it and meeting it up. Okay? So that's what it's starting to look like. So what we ultimately will do, and I want you to get to this point, we're going to go in and we're going to hand stitch that down. We definitely want to hand stitch the shoulder seams on the facing, because you don't want to machine stitch that, because you will actually see that on the outside of the garment. The finishing of the neckline, we could do one of two things. You can either continue hand stitching it, just small little blind stitch, or you can baste it, and then on the outside you can do a stitch in the ditch on the back, because when the blouse is on, for the most part, the collar is down, you're never going to see that stitch. So that is our collar. One minor thing I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to send you off. The armhole edge of the yoke, again, 2 layers because we have a self-enclosed yoke. Just stitch those layers together, just like we did with the neckline. Again, no need to back tack. You're going right along the edge, just keeping those layers together so that when we go to set the sleeve in, you don't run the risk of any layers separating, so it just keeps everything nice and clean and in one unit. Again, right on the edge. Okay, can we do this? Can we finish this class in 2 more classes? Okay.
And then we have an exam in the last class?
The last, no, it's 2 more classes.